They said the past dies with time, that memories fade, that scars turn into new skin, that memory is merciful to those who keep moving forward. But I learned, in the silence of my own steps, that some stories don't die, they sleep. And what sleeps within us wakes one day. That's how it was with me. I was the pastor's daughter, Angelina. A name repeated in prayers on Sunday mornings, in leadership lists, in community flyers. From a young age, my life was shaped like a showcase of purity, an example of righteousness, a living promise of continuity for my father's ministry. I smiled in photos, played the piano with reverence, memorized verses, and heard day after day that I was different from the others. But no one saw what I hid. Not even him, the man who was once everything and then nothing. The young. Man my father called a lost cause, the same one who made me feel alive for the first time, and who then vanished, leaving no trace. For years, I convinced myself he was just a memory, a youthful mistake, a love that had to die so I could remain standing where I was required to stand. I did everything right. I stayed silent when I needed. 2 declined invitations that would take me far away, accepted the path left open to me as my only option, and on the outside, I seemed content. But inside, there was an absence so vast that even the most beautiful hymns sounded empty to my ears. I didn't cry, not in prayer, not in pain, because if I started, I might never stop. I got involved with a respectable man, upright, admired by the community. I accepted his marriage proposal without excitement but with calm. After all, after so many years trying to extinguish what burned in me, anything that didn't ignite seemed safe. I didn't want passion. I wanted peace. But then, it all came back. First as a casual comment, a name dropped carelessly in the bakery line. Then in fleeting glances, in steps that echoed too loudly on the town's streets. It was him. Years older, his face weathered, his walk slower, but still with that presence that unsettled me. The man my father banished from our circle, the one who vanished without explanation, was back. And it took just 2 seconds, seeing him across the street, for everything I had built to tremble. It wasn't just my heart that remembered. It was my body. It was the silence of all those years screaming inside me. I wanted to run, to deny, to forget again. But there was something in that brief reunion stronger than any effort to hold back. I still loved that man, and if that love still existed, even after everything, what else in me was a lie? In the days that followed, I tried to continue my routine as if nothing had changed, as if his image wasn't etched in every corner of my mind, as if my body still obeyed the steady rhythm of before. But it didn't. It was as if time had cracked, open, and everything I had hidden behind discipline and faith began to slip through the gaps. I started passing by the street where I saw him, making excuses, like someone hoping to find without seeming to search. And one day, I did. It wasn't like in books. No dramatic meeting of eyes, no gust of wind, no sweeping words. It was just a crossing of paths. He was leaving an old town grocery store. I was returning from a pastoral visit with my fiancé. Our eyes met for a moment that felt eternal. He recognized me. I felt it. But he said nothing. He just looked away with a half smile, and that small, restrained gesture undid me more than any declaration could have. I went home with my heart out of rhythm, and for the first time in years, I struggled to pray. The words wouldn't come. Only his face did, and with it came memories I thought I had buried forever. The first time he held my hand, trembling with fear and desire, the note hidden inside my Bible. The night we almost ran away, but I backed out at the last moment. The fight with my father, the disappointed looks from the congregation, the whispers of the older women. That story which everyone treated as a youthful crisis, was the truest moment of my life, and no matter how they tried to erase it, it was all still there, whole, pulsing. I looked in the mirror that night and barely recognized myself. Not because of my appearance, but because I saw in my own eyes the shadow of a woman who never had a chance to be. The next morning I sat beside my fiancé in church and felt an emptiness impossible to ignore. He prayed with fervor, smiled with tenderness, treated everyone with courtesy. He was a good man, but I didn't love him, and maybe I never had. I realized, with a pain that tore through me, that I was about to repeat the cycle imposed on me, choosing what was right in the eyes of others while sacrificing what was real inside me. And worse, I was doing it consciously, not because I was forced, boosted, but because I had learned to betray myself with ease. But that man's return, even without words, even without promises, exposed something I could no longer hide. The past was alive, and its echo called to me, loud, clear, like a summons I couldn't ignore. I was the one who sought him out. Not directly, not obviously. There was still a thick layer of guilt and vigilance within me. But I started frequenting the streets where I knew he might be. I visited the sick in the neighborhood more often, helped with the youth in the community, attended town center events, all under the guise of mission, kindness, pastoral presence. But I knew it was just an excuse to be near him. One day, the inevitable reunion happened. He was alone, leaning against the side wall of his uncle's old shop, smoking a cigarette with a distant look in his eyes. I stopped across the street, as if something pulled me off my path. And finally, he looked. He looked at me as if the years had collapsed between us in a single second. And for the first time since he returned, he said my name. Angelina. Just that, but said with such weight, such longing, such truth, that I almost forgot what it was like to hear my identity without the title of pastor's daughter plastered over it. Crossing that street was like crossing a line I swore never to cross again. But I crossed it. And when I stood before him, closer, than was prudent, I realized he had changed. Harder features, longer silences, a wearier gaze. But there was also something serene in him, a maturity that hit me hard. He didn't ask why I was there, nor did I ask why he came back. We stood in silence for a few seconds, a dense silence filled with everything we never said. And then he said, without preamble, "I thought you'd forgotten." I wanted to respond. I wanted to say I tried, that I fought, that I wore another life, another name, another love. But all I could do was shake my head in denial. Because there, looking at him, I wasn't the woman others had shaped. I was just that girl from years ago, the one who chose love and was torn from it. We talked little, simple words. He said he came back because of his mother, who was ill. He said he'd lost a lot in life, but somehow felt he needed to see the town again before leaving for good. I just listened. I didn't mention my engagement, the church, or my father. It wasn't the time. When we parted, it was with a look that said what our mouths didn't dare. There's still something here. And that day, I understood that no matter how much they separate us, silence us, or discipline us, some stories never end. They just stay quiet, waiting for the right moment to begin again. That night when I got home, the house felt strange, or maybe I was the one who was different. The couch where I always sat with my fiancé felt colder. The sound of cutlery at the table felt mechanical. The words between us, which I once called calm, now felt like forced silence. He looked at me with kindness, talked about dates, flowers, plans for the future, and I agreed with everything, like someone signing a contract without reading the fine print. But inside something churned. It wasn't guilt, nor doubt, but something deeper, the realization that I was about to take a step that didn't belong to me. I was about to seal a life that wasn't mine, because my heart, no matter how I tried, was no longer there. In the days that followed, the reunion visited me like a constant whisper. I tried not to think, but thinking was inevitable. I tried to escape the memory, but the memory followed me, in the smell of coffee, the creak of the church gate, the eyes of those who knew me without needing to speak. Even the altar felt different. Sitting in the sanctuary that watched me grow, surrounded by people who called me an example, I felt a vast emptiness. And for the first time, I asked myself, how many other women had said yes in this same place with a no choking in their throats? It was on a Saturday afternoon, alone in a pew at the back of the empty church, that the truth hit me with unbearable weight. I didn't love the man I was going to marry, and worse, he didn't know me. He knew the pastor's daughter, the modest woman, the perfect partner for his life's mission. But he didn't know my conflicts, my desires, my fears, and he didn't know, as I now did, that my heart still belonged to someone the world deemed unsuitable. I left there with trembling hands and a burning chest, because I knew that from that moment on, I would either choose love or keep living, the best applauded lie in town. The days began to unfold with a silent intensity, as if time had taken on a new density. I found myself more absent in conversations, slower in responses, more distant from the tasks that once filled my routine with a false sense of duty fulfilled. It was as if something inside me was quietly reorganizing itself without asking my permission. And in that secret reordering, he kept appearing, in unexpected places, at different times, as if fate was determined not to let me forget. We never planned anything. We never exchanged messages. But we saw each other, and each encounter, however brief, left a trace I couldn't ignore. In one of those chance meetings, we sat together for the first time. It was on a bench in the old town square, where we used to spend hours years ago, dreaming of a future we were never allowed to build. We didn't talk about the past right away. We talked about the town, the changes, his mother's illness that brought him back. But there was a gentle tension between us, an urgency hovering over every silence, until he took a deep breath and said, "You know what's strangest? I came back thinking everything had changed, but when I saw you, I realized it was me who had changed. You're still here. It's still you." And I didn't know how to respond, because he was right and wrong at the same time. I was the same, yes, deep down. But I was also a woman full of cracks, stacked decisions, promises I never made but had to keep. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep pretending that love had died, because it was there, alive, and it looked me in the eyes. In the days that followed, I started to feel guilty, not for seeing him, but for not feeling guilty enough. I, who had always carried the burden of obedience like a sacred mission, now found myself flirting with everything I was taught to avoid. The church, my family, my fiancé, they all expected me to be steady, constant, proper. But inside me, an unbearable need to be simply true was growing. Not perfect, not appropriate, just honest with myself. I started avoiding my fiancé. I made excuses for meetings, left messages unanswered, pulled back from touches. And he noticed. He didn't say anything, but he noticed. And maybe that hurt, more than any direct confrontation, because I knew I was about to hurt a good man. But I also knew that if I didn't, the wound would be mine, and it would bleed for a lifetime. It was on a Sunday morning that everything overflowed. We were in church, and my fiancé had been invited to lead part of the service. Sitting beside me, he radiated confidence. The congregation looked at him with pride, and my father, even older, quieter, kept that expression of someone who believes everything is finally in its right place. And me? I couldn't breathe. With every word he spoke from the pulpit, I felt myself drifting further from the woman I wanted to be, the one who laughed for real, the one who loved without fear, the one who desired with body and soul without needing to hide. The sanctuary that once felt like a refuge now felt like a gilded prison, filled with people who applauded me for a holiness I no longer recognized as mine. That afternoon I went to him. The man time couldn't erase. I waited, on the same bench in the square where we had sat days before. He arrived shortly after, with the look of someone who already knew why I was there. He looked at me with tenderness, but not pity, with steadiness, but not haste. And when he asked, in a low voice with his heart in his eyes, if I was happy, I couldn't lie, I couldn't smile. I just shook my head and let the tears speak for me. He didn't try to comfort me. He didn't try to convince me. He just stayed there, beside me, his whole body saying, I'm here, if you want to come back. And in that moment, the idea of coming back stopped being an escape from the present. It became the only way to find myself again. In the days that followed, I had difficult conversations, first with my father, then with my fiancé, then with myself. None of them were easy, none of them came without pain, but they were all necessary. Because for the first time in years, I was speaking the truth. Not the truth others expected to hear, but mine. The woman everyone knew as the obedient pastor's daughter was shedding the layers that never belonged to her. And what remained, amid tears, scars, and desire, was someone who just wanted to live a whole life. With mistakes, with faith, with love, but a true life. And I knew it would take courage. But I also knew that without it, I would never be free. The conversation with my father was the hardest. Not because he shouted or cursed me, but because he did exactly what I feared. He looked at me as if I had betrayed him. He didn't raise his voice. He just listened. And that hurt more than any sermon. Every word that left my mouth felt like it was tearing away a piece of the woman he had so carefully built. I told him the wedding wouldn't happen, that I couldn't go through with it knowing my heart was elsewhere, that I didn't want to live to please anymore. Not him, not the church, not the image I'd worn since adolescence. He looked at me for a long time, silent. And then, with a choked voice, he said, "Do you know what this will do to your reputation, Angelina?" And I replied with a lump in my throat, "If it's to save my soul, Dad, let the reputation fall." He didn't say anything else. He just looked away, like someone refusing to watch a person choose to leave the narrow path. My fiancé reacted with a dignity that broke me even more. He didn't try to convince me, didn't make a scene. He just nodded sadly, like someone who had already noticed the distance but still held a sliver of hope. He told me he wished me peace, and that despite the pain, he preferred a painful truth to a comfortable lie. And I hugged him as if asking forgiveness for something never spoken, for not loving him as he deserved. For the first time, I felt the weight of freedom. It's not light, it's not romantic, it's not cinematic, it's brutal. Because you strip away everything imposed as virtue, and in its place, you stand bare, real, human. That same day, I went to his house. The man who waited without promising, the love that slept but never died. He opened the door with the same look as always, steady, quiet, full of world. He didn't need to ask anything. I walked in, sat down, and for a few minutes we didn't say a single word. Then I took his hand, placed it between mine, and said, "I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to lie anymore. If there's still room for me, I'm here." He smiled, not with euphoria, but with that quiet relief of someone who waited for the right time. And then he answered, "There always was, and there always will be. And there, in that moment, without applause, without an audience, without formal blessings, I knew. Love didn't need to be accepted by everyone. It just needed to be lived. Time didn't stop after my choice. It kept moving, as always, with its demands and surprises. But inside me, something had quieted. The pressure, the guilt, the fear, all the noises that had followed me since adolescence seemed to lose their strength. Not because the world around me changed, but because I no longer bent to fit inside it. Living with him, the man who was once my secret and now my refuge, wasn't easy. We carried marks. We had scars that time didn't erase. But there was truth, there was maturity, and above all, there was choice. For the first time, love wasn't a challenge to be won, but a home where I could rest. The town remained divided. Some avoided me, others whispered. There were those who said I destroyed everything, that my father would never recover, that I became a subject of prayer and disappointment. But there were also looks that truly recognized me. People who might never have had the courage to do the same, but who, in silence, respected me for having mine. And with time, even the whispers faded, because life, in the end, always moves on. And I moved with it, with more calm, more presence, more love. Today there's no shiny ring on my finger, no packed schedule of religious duties, no title preceding me. But there's peace, the peace of someone who no longer owes anything to anyone except their own soul, the peace of someone who finally found themselves. And if all it took was listening to the echo of an old love to remember who I was, then what a blessed echo that was. Because it didn't just rekindle a flame, it gave me back to myself. Years have passed, and the winds have changed many things. My father no longer leads the church. His health has weakened, and with it, some of the rigidity with which he viewed the world has softened. Today, our conversations are short but less sharp. Sometimes he asks if I'm happy, and I just smile. Because explaining my happiness would require unraveling a lifetime of rules, and he's carried enough time on his shoulders to understand it all now. I still live in the same town. I pass by people who once judged me, and now they just lower their gaze. But it no longer hurts me. I have my corner, my work, my routine, and I have him, the love I waited for half my life without knowing. We share the day with simplicity and the silence with comfort. There's no need to prove anything to anyone, because when love is true, it doesn't need to be defended. It just needs to be lived, in peace, at home, in us.